Hours after Sheikh Hasina resigned as Prime Minister of the country and fled, it's absolute anarchy in the country. But as the Bangladesh has plunged into chaos, extremists turned the political turmoil into an opportunity to unleash violence and launch attacks on minorities in Bangladesh. Within hours of these clashes, hundreds of Hindus have reportedly been killed, including a Hindu councillor. Homes and temples have come under attack, including an ISKCON temple and a Kali temple specifically targeted, forcing devotees to take shelter. Horrifying testimonies of Hindus have revealed their plight. Times Now spoke to Sumohan Mukundas, the director of the Meherpur ISKCON Prachar Kendra, who is still in hiding in the temple. He has detailed how the temple was burnt and attacked, their belongings set ablaze or taken away, forcing them to take shelter in temples.
अभी सिर्फ आप नहीं लगा है, अभी बम भी फुटा है। देखिए आप, हमारा जो मंदिर का जो सीलिंग है और जो बम के जो तरह सब कुछ तोड़ गया। अभी देखो इधर सब कुछ तर गया, तोड़ फोड़ किया और हमारा मंदिर का जो जितना सामान है सब कुछ ले गया और जला दिया, कुछ नहीं बचा। ऐसे होता है हमारा बांग्लादेश में, हर गली में, हर मंदिर पे, हर जगह पे। क्योंकि बांग्लादेश में ऐसा होता, क्योंकि इसमें होता रहता है क्योंकि हमारे कोई विचार नहीं होता है, कुछ नहीं है। अभी तक मेरा जान की खतरा है। मैं अभी छुप कर, आप देखो मेरा मेरा पंजाबी के अंदर में जो गेंजी है, अभी मंदिर से बाहर जाऊंगा, मैं भेष बदल के जाना पड़ेगा क्योंकि इस भेष में हम बाहर जाएंगे हमको जान का खतरा है। ऐसा काल आगुन, इतना आगुन लगाया, हम इतना बार फायर सर्विस को फोन किया, फायर सर्विस भी नहीं आया अभी तक। देखिए हम हमारा कितना इंसिक्योर है बांग्लादेश में। हम सबको पास विनती करते हैं भारतवासी को, आप सब आइए, मिलकर सब हमारा बांग्लादेशी हिंदू को प्रोटेस्ट कीजिए, क्योंकि देखते हैं हम और ज्यादा और भी जितना जो रिलीजियस है सबके लिए वो हमदर्दी दिखाते हैं। लेकिन हमारा एक दुख की बात है, हम बांग्लादेशी है, हमारा बांग्लादेश हिंदू है, जो हिंदू लिए कोई आवाज नहीं उठता है, वो हिंदू की कोई विचार नहीं होता है।
And to discuss the situation there, we have with us Pankaj Saran, who's a former Deputy NSA as well as formerly India's ambassador to Bangladesh. Thank you so much, Mr. Saran, for joining us. Now, the situation, the kind of violence that we've seen, and in fact, we've seen External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar refer to the concerns as well. Of course, there are a large number of Indians present there, about 19,000 of them at the moment. But these kind of violent incidents, they're not taking place for the first time, but certainly raising huge concern given the time that we've seen temples, homes, etc. being attacked, and very such disturbing reports in similar vein that have been coming out of there. Your reaction to the incidents that have been taking place, Mr. Saran?
Yeah, I think the attacks on the Hindus and the minorities there are absolutely unacceptable. Historically, they have always been at the short end of the stick when it comes to the politics of Bangladesh. And what we are seeing is literally the ugliest face of the radical elements. And this tells us what could be in store in the coming months, if not more, if the radicals decide and are given the chance to take over. I think it's very, very unfortunate. I don't think this has anything to do with the aspirations of the students or quotas or jobs or education. This is quite simply a case of an agitation getting hijacked by the political opponents of the Awami League. The only thing we must understand and always remember is that these radical elements do not constitute the majority of the views of the people of Bangladesh. They are a minority, but they want to assert their position, and because of the cadre strength, they are able to succeed. But they do not represent the society at large. There is a huge section of the society which continues to believe and has always believed in good relations with India, in upholding the legacy and the linkages of Bangladesh, of Bengal as an identity, etc. So what we are seeing literally is the worst phase and the worst face of some of these elements, and most of them actually belong to not just the Jamaat-e-Islami, but also other Islamist groups. And the government of India has taken it up, and the army chief has issued instructions. But whether the state institutions today have the ability to prevent and stop is a big question. So I think we just have to watch very closely how bad this gets.
Right, that's a very, very important aspect that you mentioned. But, you know, the concern is this. The concern is that while there may be an interim government, while there may be, you know, an all-party government, etc., the fact that these radical elements that you mentioned just now, who in the past have been seen being very inimical to India's interest, could have a say in that. And also the fact that the kind of nature of protests that we're seeing taking place on the streets, how much of a concern is that? Because the outgoing regime has been pretty much in India's favor when it comes to either tackling terror groups that exist on Indian soil or even radical elements that exist on Bangladesh soil. How will things change from here on in your view?
No, I think, as I've said earlier, I think we should expect things to get worse before they get better. And we are exactly in the thick of the crisis. Her departure from Dhaka yesterday was only one aspect of it. But the aftershocks are going to be felt, and we should be prepared for unforeseen events. We should be prepared for serious challenges to state institutions of the country, whether it is the constitutional side of it or the military side of it, etc. So definitely, I think at this point in time, and I think that's what the government of India is doing, that they are prepared for everything and anything. And I believe they will be trying to reach out to at least the armed forces, because today they are the ones in control, to convey India's concerns. But the fact of the matter is that under Sheikh Hasina, she turned the tide against the whole industry of terror that had flourished under Khalida Zia with the full patronage of the ISI. And this decision of hers to fight back the terror within Bangladesh and across the border into India enjoyed national consensus. There was no one in Bangladesh who had the courage to challenge her crackdown on terrorism, on radical ideologies, and on hurting Indian security interests in the northeast or West Bengal or wherever it was. Even today, there is a huge, sizable section of the Bangladeshi society which believes that the fight against terror is as much Bangladesh's as it is India's. So when she went about dismantling the terror infrastructure, she had a huge consensus of the army, the police, the intelligence agencies, the intelligentsia, everyone. No one questioned what she was doing.
Right. Right. But, you know, at the moment, what we're looking at in terms of Sheikh Hasina is that the United States appears to have revoked the visa given to Sheikh Hasina, and the UK appears unwilling to grant her political asylum. There are other countries that have been spoken about, Helsinki, so on and so forth. But what would you think the future holds as far as Sheikh Hasina is concerned? Because New Delhi also has a difficult balancing act to do as far as Sheikh Hasina is concerned. On one hand, you have a friend. On the other hand, you have a potential regime that one will have to work with in Dhaka, which is not exactly in favor of Sheikh Hasina.
Yeah, so on the latter part, of course, we will stand by our friends. And this is what everyone expects us to do. After all, we live in this neighborhood. We have many small neighbors. Everyone is watching us. And we have a duty to stand up with our friends. So that's the answer to the second part of your question. When it comes to dealing with the government in Bangladesh, let it be formed first. Right now, there is nothing. So who are we supposed to cater to? Whose question? Tomorrow, if there is a government, the day after, whenever it happens, what shape it takes, who knows? We will see. I mean, I don't think we should prejudge. On the question of the US, UK reactions and all, I would actually be more respectful to those actions if they had pursued the same standards against Hasina, which they have pursued against their own dictators. Whether it is Mubarak, whether it is the president of Philippines, whether it is the sheikdoms of the Gulf, etc., etc. I mean, all of them have prospered under the full patronage of Western democracies. Whether it's for Mubarak for 30 years, the Gulf sheikdoms for generations, There is no talk of democracy in those countries by the West. This practice of double standards, to me, actually reflects that the use of democracy as a tool is vacuous. Because we do not see them practicing it when it comes to situations in which their core national interests are involved.
Very interesting you mentioned that, because I was just about to ask you about the events preceding all of this. Of course, the protests have been on for some time on the streets of Bangladesh. But prior to this, we had seen, for instance, a visit to Beijing that wasn't particularly successful. In fact, it was cut short. There's also a lot of talk of the role of the US deep state. Do you think that these protests could have been fomented on the scale that they were without some kind of external influence there in Bangladesh, Mr. Saran?
Well, two, three things. I mean, obviously, there is a very vibrant Bangladeshi diaspora which lives in the United Kingdom, in the United States, in Canada. I mean, these are people who are actually opposed and have been opposed to the Awami League and the Sheikh Hasina government. And they have been, using Western democratic institutions to mount massive campaigns against the Hasina government, and this has been going on for 10 years. So I wouldn't say that this is something new. I mean, Khaleda Zia's own son has been given asylum in London for years after he was kicked out of Bangladesh under disgrace. So, but on the question of their role in what happened, I would put it differently. I would say that it is an open secret that the relationship between Hasina and the United States has been rock bottom from the day she took over power in 2007 or 8. And even prior to that, the United States has had a fundamental problem with the Awami League and its ideology. And this, in fact, predates back to 1971. So Hasina never made a secret of the fact that she did not like the Americans, and the Americans likewise made no secret of the fact that they did not like her. Now, the question is how much of it should influence our own policy? I mean, we live next door. To me, what really matters is my national interests. And when we talk about democracy as being the panacea and the solution for all of Bangladesh's problems, we have a 50-year-old history which shows us that even the most democratically elected leaders have become tyrants and despots in Bangladesh because the philosophy and the nature of the country is such that the winner gets all. Whether it is Khaleda Zia, whether it is Hasina, whether it is anyone else. So the use of democracy as this so-called silver bullet, which is going to solve Bangladesh's problems, again rings totally hollow.
Right. So there is, of course, a counter view. And I must ask you this because I spoke to Mr. Mohammed Yunus, who's going to, by all reports, going to play an important role in at least the interim government there. And he says that India's policy has been focused on one person, Sheikh Hasina, rather than the people of Bangladesh. Do you think that this is a fair criticism?
No, it's rubbish. I mean, if Sheikh Hasina is the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, what am I supposed to do? I mean, who should I focus on? Should I focus on him? Tomorrow, if he becomes the Prime Minister, I'll focus on him. I mean, the fact is that I will focus on who the Prime Minister is. I did not elect Sheikh Hasina in 2008 or in 2013 or anywhere else. I did not tell her to function as a leader in certain ways. That was her choice, her decision. There were enough checks and balances in the country. So obviously it is in my interest, as it is in the interest of the United States, to support Hosni Mubarak for 30 years. He was an army dictator for 30 years because he served their interests. They never talked about democracy there, and they focused on one man. This is the way life is. I mean, he should know it. So tomorrow, if he becomes Prime Minister, of course, I'll focus on him. The question is, I will focus on who the Prime Minister is, and I will focus on, and when Khaleda was there, I was focused on her also, except that her agenda was to hurt India every day she was in power.
Right.
Hasina's agenda was to build the relationship. So it depends on, the constellation and the context.
Right. And I also want to ask you lastly, in terms of, you served at the highest levels as far as as being the Deputy NSA is concerned. For India, where we've already traditionally had Pakistan and China, flanking us on two fronts, we also have a situation of now Bangladesh. There are concerns, of course, in Maldives, Nepal. There have been issues in the recent past. In India's neighborhood of South Asia, particularly, given the kind of recent activities that we've been seeing, what really are the implications for India, which appears to be the only stable democracy in the region?
Well, I would not over-exaggerate. I don't want to get into breastbeating and self-flagellation. The fact of the matter is that we all know what are the kind of neighbors we have, what are the constraints they have, what are the realities of their economies, their geographies, their identities. We will have to live with it. And I think over time, our bandwidth to handle multiple crises at the same time has grown exponentially. There will be occasions where we have good constellations across the region, and there will be occasions where you do not. The question is whether you're asking me, I should ensure that every government in power is friendly to India. I can try and do that, but then I'll be accused of interfering in the internal affairs of the other countries. And if I do not, then I'm accused of failure of foreign policy. So this is not the way, the real life works. I know what I have. I will work when I can, with whom I can, and I will keep enough bandwidth and enough buffer to deal with crises when they happen.
Pankaj Saran, thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking to us here at Times Now.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Slipping into a quick break, more news and updates coming up on the other side. Stay tuned.